Kyle here from All Media Reviews, here to do MPAR, Modern Progressive Art Rock Calendar 2009, sort of long epic list. Although it's not quite as long, it's probably going to be two parts. So this will be part one, and then I'll stop and do the part two or whatever. So, all right, and this is probably going to be the last one I'm going to do for a while. I don't know when I'll resume this. I just want to get back to the CDAZ and see if I can finish that. But anyway, I had one. There's more I'm probably not remembering, of course, but there's one CD, one album at least. I mean, the Bloc Party catalog kind of fell off to me after Weekend in the City, but Intimacy, their album from 2008, I did miss. Came out on August 21st, 2008. Same month as Warp Paint's Exquisite Corpse. Um, yeah, that was pretty much it. Oh, and yeah, okay, 821. It came out like a couple days after the Stills, The Oceans Will Rise, and a few days before the Rain of Kingdoms Rhythm, Chord, and Melody. But yeah, it's got that song Mercury, that Mercury in retrograde. I always think of. I'd never heard that phrase until then. I've been hearing it a lot since then. But anyway, Block Parties would be their fourth album. Intimacy. The fifth one came out a few years later, like 2012. I almost like a little more, but I don't really have a huge preference between them. But anyway, so on to 2009. 2009, the last year of the two. I don't call it the aughts or the naughties or the aught. Yeah, to me, it's just the 2000s. Um, 2000s decades. And it was it was more of a quantity over quality. Although there was a lot of my favorite albums that came out this year, and it was a pretty good year for progressive art rock. A lot of the big hitters came out with records, so not everything, but and also was kind of, since it was the end of the decade, it did sort of feel like this and the year after were sort of like the changing a little bit in some ways of an era. But anyway, let's get on to it. So the first thing I got two albums and two releases in January. First one is Sound and Shapes, The Love Electric. I didn't talk about their debut album, which came out in 2007, but I'm not as familiar with that. And this actually remains really the only album, only release, so it's an EP actually, that I really love from this band. I've liked their last two records more than some of the previous ones, but um, here it is. Sound of Shapes, the Love Electric EP. There was like the little like hype sticker mentioned Dredge and Muse, I remember, but Love Electric. It flows really well. The title track, and the clouds begin to part, and we began as two. I don't know. It kind of reminded me a little bit of like a little bit like Ben Sinister, a little bit like House of Fools, in that kind of. Yeah, I mean it has a blues rock element, so a little bit like Dream Electric Sleep, who we'll see later in the next when I resume this in how many weeks or months from now. But anyway, the Love Electric from Sound and Shape on January 18th, and 2 days later. Now I can also mention I did all these albums. I mentioned most of them in the anniversaries last year for the 15th anniversary. So these are now 16 years old. But um, the little known German, I believe they're German, post rock band that used samples, and this is their only release, I think. I don't know what happened to them after this, but it was a free album, and then I think I bought this physical copy. Note with a period on the end, lowercase. Um, My City of Ghosts, comma Stars and Hours. I don't think it's on Spotify, but it's on Bandcamp. But I mean, there's a little bit of a blues rock element to it, but it's a very effective way to use post rock, very atmospheric, and it has samples from like that movie with Robin Williams, Good Will Hunting. That and then a couple other samples. It's kind of hit me like a ton of bricks when I heard it. Although I remember hearing it many months after it came out. But anyway, not the only. I want to say that they're German. I'm pretty sure they're German. Post rock band that came out. A Note band when MySpace was still around. That came out this year. But anyway, and I remember I was in communication with them. Maybe that's how I got the CD. So, all right, February 2nd, um, saw the release of another sort of heavy post rock or post metal band, Shelter Red. I believe they're from somewhere in the Midwest, maybe either Portland or Seattle. Um, and I think this is their debut. It might be their second, one of the either debut or second, called Strike a Mortal Terror. Strike a Mortal Terror, which and this is actually pressed in Utah. It's interesting, but I know they were at some point based in the Pacific Northwest because I got the one that followed it with, but that was from where I was communicating with them. Anyway, Silence versus the label, but Strike a Mortal Tear. This is, yeah, it's like, it kind of reminds me of like instrumental Porcupine Tree in a way. You know, I was looking for an alternative. I wasn't really feeling even the Russian Circle stuff. Like I didn't even have Station on the list. Russian Circles and um, Pelican and the post metal stuff that people love. Isis and Pelican not really doing a lot for me. Really, the one Russian Circles album, and this was one of the examples. I discovered this probably long after it came out, though, January or February 2nd. So anyway, that was February 2nd, and then the day after saw the release of actually that was February 3rd. My bad. I missed one. I missed a key one. So that was February 3rd. I was off by a date. My apologies. So this is February 3rd. This was February. So these came out back to back. This is February 2nd, the Note album, and February 3rd, Shelter Red. Post rock, heavy post rock. So, but this was on. I know there was another release on the 20th of January, right on the Super Bowl. Close to that. Umphrey's McGee released Mantis, their masterpiece. I mean, I love Anchor Drops. Some of the records of the last one from a couple of years ago I really like. But this to me is they sound a little like Spock's Beard, but this is like their best songwriting. Proggy. The jam band element is very unapparent on here. The title track, Cemetery Walk and Cemetery Walk 2, that like Sweet, is catchy as hell. Spires, Red Tape. This is a fantastic album. Again, it's peak Umphrey's McGee. I saw them. That was the last time I saw them because I kind of got sick of the jam band cliches, even though I like sometimes when they do covers. But from a studio album standpoint, studio recordings, this is the best work. And this came out on January 20th, 2 days after the Sound and Shape album. So my apologies for messing up the order in this one. Anyway, so that's it for that. By the way, I'm doing the anniversaries, but I'm not going to be doing videos. I'm going to publish probably a list either once a month or twice a month, or I might just publish the whole thing, but I'm still working on it. A lot of albums that are celebrating milestone anniversaries, so 20, 40, 50, 35, 25, 15, and 10. So February 17th saw the release of February 10th, actually. So February was a pretty big month where you had the two post-rock, post-metal albums, Note and Shelter Red. Then February 10th, you had Malajube. Again, I talked about this in the anniversary list. Their album Labyrinthes. Their best record, too, in my mind. I like the previous record. The one that followed was not as good. This is their most proggy. I listened to this about a year ago. I remember just revisiting it, and it's like, yeah, there's like these fun, catchy, funny, very quirky builds on this. It's all French. They're from Montreal, I believe. But Malajube. February 10th, 2009, Labyrinth. I don't know if it's a story, concept album about someone trying to go through like a maze or a labyrinth. But that came out on February 10th, 2009. Screw that up. So then February 17th saw two releases. One I do have a physical copy of, and one I don't believe I have a physical copy. I'll show it in the next video, show it later maybe. I don't think I ever got a physical copy of the debut EP from Emanuel and the Fear. Really good though. I mean, a little bit like the Reign of Kindo, where I knew them from their debut full length, but the previous, like the debut EP, was really impressive. I think there's a version of Jimmy's song on this, but yes, unfortunately, they were very good early. Emanuel and the Fear. They're not. Their recent stuff. Another band that kind of the early stuff really does it more for me, and I feel is more progressive. So, chamber rock band. They use a lot of instrumentation, especially on the debut album that came out. It was the year after, but so that was on February 17th, and the same day, the debut, I think, only album from the band Sholi. Kind of the Mars Volta like, kind of I don't know, blues rock at times. And I revisited this a year ago. I was like showing this on an anniversary. The song Tourniquet's really good. They're a forgotten band, but contortionist. Sholi, February 17, 2009 released. It was a self-titled debut album. Yeah, so I think I got this at Zia in Arizona. But so that was the same day as the Emanuel and the Fear album, the EP rather. So that was in February. Now that's it for February. Now moving on to March. All right, so a big record that I'm guilty of, did not know about until much later in the year, and it was right on the title kind of fit what was going on in my life, because my grandfather was put into this, but the Antlers album Hospice. I mean, emotionally just jarring at times, very melancholy. Reminds me of some of the most melancholy, beautiful music around that time frame, especially like Never on New Lights and some compare it to Jeff Buckley in some ways. So many tracks on here. It's very, I mean, some of his singer songwriters, some of it's a little bit in the slow core, kind of like low, but I feel like it flowed better. The previous record I really liked as well. I showed that on the previous video, but Sylvia, I think that was the one of the singles. That one in Bear, but Shiva, the guy's the lead singer is, I believe, it was Jewish. Silverman, Adam Silverman, forget his first name. Two, a Trophy Kettering, and of course, like Wake and Epilogue. But yeah, I mean, from a sort of, if you're dealing with loss, this is a great record to sort of Misery Loves Company. But it's jarring, but it's emotional and it's beautiful at the same time. Hospice from the Antlers. Fortunately, the follow up, a lot of people love. I didn't like it nearly as much. I saw them live on that tour. I saw them live on that tour, and I skipped Transatlantic in Chicago for it actually, but budget. So that same day, that was on the 3rd of March. That same day, Bruce Peninsula puts out their debut album, A Mountain Is a Mouth. Great band from Canada, tribal Prague. Mars Volta fans love them. This has songs like Crab Apples and great vocal harmonies from like females, like very like gang vocals, percussion oriented at points. The singer does kind of sound a little bit like the male singer, like Tom Waits, but he kind of grew on me, and I'm not that into Tom Waits. He kind of fits the music, but great debut album. I actually think it's my favorite, although I like the follow up a lot too. They don't have a bad record, Bruce Peninsula, but they've been limited. But I'm glad they've come back. They put out a record a few years ago, like 2020 or 2021. But A Mountain Is a Mouth, the debut album from the same day as Hospice from the Antlers, from Bruce Peninsula, Mountain Is a Mouth, coming out on March 3rd. Then 6 days later, you had two more releases. One being the follow-up, one of the most anticipated albums in my whole life. I was like so obsessed with this band. Pure Reason Revolution's Amor, Vincit, Omnia was released on March 9th, 2009. More electronic, a departure in some ways, but came with a DVD and everything. But ultimately, I think it was for the best that they didn't repeat themselves exactly. Of course, they had played live some of these songs like Deus Ex Machina and Victorious Cupid, I love. But Bloodless, Disconnect, The Gloaming is long and epic. A lot of fat synths that don't overstay their welcome, and unfortunately I can't say like the stuff they've done since they returned have been quite as good. I mean, they haven't done music as much like this. This is their most electronic record, but I think it worked. It was an experiment to do something different, and it worked ultimately. There's some of an industrial element. The Dark Third really didn't have any songs that had much of an industrial element. This had a little bit, especially on Deus Ex Machina. But anyway, Amor, Vincent, Omnia. It's anticipated it may actually come out on vinyl soon, like this year. I hope so. It'll be the only one that I'm missing, although I need to replace one of them. Kind of got damaged. But the same day, that was on March 9, 2009, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs put out, not their most recent record. They put out one or two after this. But the one I liked the most, because I didn't even include the Karen O soundtrack for the Where the Wild Things Are, but it's Karen O's band, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and it's Blitz. I feel like, well, there's a punk element to that, dance punk, I suppose you could say. There's a little bit of art rock in there. There's a couple of hits, and one song has gotten played frequently. But yeah, some of the guitar textures. It's Blitz is the one album from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs I've continually gone back to, although I don't think I have a copy of it. I was meant to buy a copy, but anyway, that was on the same day on March 9, 2009. The day after that, local Minnesota progressive artist Greg Herriges releases the follow-up to It Plays Me, Telluric Currents, which was like the name of his band. It has the album of, he's only released a few records, but the record that he's done some collaborations and bands, of course, too. But Rama Be Good and what's the other one? Sabir Khan's song are my two favorites. I Hear is great. Rama Be Good, you can sort of hear a lot of Zeppelin, specifically Four Sticks, and he actually has played that for years live. I think it was, I don't know if he would have done it anyways. My friend John and I mentioned that to him. It's like, It has like a four sticks kind of rhythm to it. Dun, 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 you know. And he on his Greek bazooka and everything. But yeah, it's excellent record. Uzkadar the Moth, which is doing like some tapping. It's very atmospheric. But yeah, it's an ethnoacoustic music at times, but very odd rhythms and very progressive. You know, he's a Rush fan, a King Crimson fan, Genesis fan. You know, why you can hear the prog in his music as much as it doesn't sound exactly like Yes or Genesis. It doesn't sound like the Mars Volta or you know, Porcupine Tree exactly. So let's see, that was the March 10th, 2009. So then a couple weeks later, sees they debut full length and the only record they release. I can't remember where they're from. I think they're from the UK, but I could be wrong. The band Grammatics. I talked about the stiletto formal in 2008, the previous video, with using the cello. Grammatics also use cello. They don't sound exactly like the Mars Volta, but it's similar. It's more like Margot Newkert so-and-so's, but they really just stand out cello with, you know, the sort of artsy indie rock stuff. But Grammatics unfortunately didn't last very long, like some of these bands. But I have one of their EPs. I never got the full length. I should try to find it on Discogs. I never thought about that, but anyway, Grammatics on March 23rd put out their debut and the swan song album, the self-titled Grammatics album, on March 23rd. Then on the day after, March 24th, sees the first kind of what I would associate sort of art rock album from this band, and was a departure a little bit more so from the Christian rock. The one before it was a little bit, but this was more so. Fangs from Falling Up, the Casey Crescenzo of the Deer Hunter produced, you know, Jesse Robordi and company. Of course, they just put out the Children Alpine Adventure, which there's a song on Fangs with that title, but you can hear the Deer Hunter influence on this a fair amount. But you could also what Jesse and Casey would do the next year, sort of kind of transitioning, and some of it kind of found its way into some of this as well. But to me, it still might be my favorite. I think from a production standpoint, the new one's better, but this still might be my favorite Falling Up album. I don't know. I kind of go back and forth. Ultimately, I might prefer the Chilling Alpine Adventure, but this is a great record. Fangs from Falling Up, coming out on the 24th of March 2009. So then on the 30th of March, and I don't know how this ended up this low. I must have missed my order here. The British band Archive puts out probably my second favorite album, maybe their most commercially successful album, Controlling Crowds. It's an epic record. They would do the sort of parallel record to it, the Controlling Crowds Alternator 4. But Bullets was the early single. It's really catchy. What's the song that I listened to this like a month ago? And I want to say Collapse Collide, maybe the one. They have female vocals. They have male and female vocals. You know, there's a trip hop element. I don't know, for some reason on this record, it sounded more polished. I think they put more money into the production. But it's over an hour long. It was one of my favorite records early on in the year, between PRR and Umphrey's McGee and a couple others. But Controlling Crowds, love to get it on vinyl, but it's really pricey. But great record. I even have a second copy from Archive, from the British band Archive, coming out on March 30th, to round out March 2009. So moving on to April, there's only one thing I got in April, and it was a pretty significant release. I think that's what happened with this. It's talking about German post-rock. Well, I mentioned their debut album in the previous video, I think, because I'd missed it. But Long Distance Callings, Avoid the Light. The second album from Long Distance Calling, the German band, on Super Bowl Music, doing progressive post-metal or heavy post-rock. But it's not like Russian Circles exactly. There was an interesting, almost original blend of, yeah, it's using samples at points, atmospheres, but there's also more technicality and more intensity at points. It's not as predictable. There was a quote in this, I remember, from The Outer Limits. I remember that was on the cover. But yeah, I mean, they have some really good records, Long Distance Calling, but this still remains to me their masterpiece. The Nearing Grave, I think, is the one track that has a guest singer. They've had vocals on some of their songs, but never had a full vocal album. But Apparitions, 359 Degrees. It's very bleak from a sort of atmosphere. A lot of post rock, a lot of post music is that way. But Avoid the Light from Long Distance Calling on April 24th, rather, 2009 came out. So 2009 was a great year in terms of a lot of great records. I hadn't heard of them until that point. So then moving on to May, sees the final album, probably the final album ever, in a reunion kind of crowd funded, basically, out of the blue. Maudlin of the Well. I have spoken my piece many times about KO Dot. Not really. I've never been able to get into much of their music because it's a little too avant-garde at points and it meanders. Even though this doesn't really have much of any metal on it, because the previous Maudlin of the Well albums definitely had metal. They have a lot of extreme riffs and vocals. It's like it is. I guess you could call this more like post rock, but of course the song titles are ridiculously long. Most of them. There's one called Glover Garland Island, and then it's called Part the Second. I didn't even mentioned that. Part the Second came out on May 14, 2009. Rose Quartz Turning to Glass, and then an excerpt from 6 trillion miles before the first, or the revisitation of the Blue Ghost. Another excerpt, Keep Light Near You Even When Dying, and Laboratories of the Invisible World, Rose Game, the Cosmic Palmistric Post Border. They're epic, but I haven't listened to this in a long time, but it's like chamber music and stuff. It's like chamber post rock, but it's almost all instrumental. I can't remember how much. Toby, I think, does do some vocals. There may be some female vocals on this, but Toby Driver. But yeah, I mean, I was showing my love for Maudlin. Maudlin's the one that I love. KO Dot is not necessarily the one I love, but it was a breath of fresh air, and I helped fund this thing. So Part the Second came out on May 14th after being some guy won like $10,000 in gambling at in Vegas, or and he gave them like all of it. That really pushed them over the top for their to be able to actually release it and release it on vinyl and everything. So that came out on May 14th, and 4 days later sees the final album per se from this band. These are supposed to be a different part. I mentioned their first album, Wolves. Well, this is a big step up when this came out. My Latest Novels album, Deaths and Entrances. Unfortunately, this was their last album. It's like the breakthrough. I thought Wolves was just okay, but this record, the songwriting, the melodies, the vocal harmonies, the dynamics, a lot of the good stuff I look for in art rock and MPAR stuff. I know there's one 20 tracks talking about war and trying to like end the war, put down your guns, ceasefire. That's the one I'm thinking of. But it's great. They've done, some of the members have a band called the Alphabetical Order Orchestra, which I have I have the vinyl from their debut AP. But unfortunately, I don't know what the members have been doing recently, because that was many years. That was like 10 years ago. But Deaths and Entrances is great. I don't know if they're ever going to get back. Maybe they did get back together. I didn't know about that. But Deaths and Entrances is from My Latest Novel from the UK. I think they're from Scotland. Coming on May 18th, 4 days after the Maudlin of the Well album, Part the Second. So then in June, so we go to June here, and Carnival puts out their second album, just like Pure Reason Revolutions, Amor, Vincit, Omnia, although this was really under wraps down under, because it got more distribution the next year, if I'm not mistaken. Like some of these albums, like 2009 was the year that Local Natives, not Local Natives, I'm going to talk about them, but 2010 was the year that Local Natives debut and got well known. But it was down under, and I pre-ordered it because I was that into Themata, the debut album from 2007. I think it was 2009 Themata started getting distribution in the US, but 2005, I'm getting mixed up. 2005 was when Themata came out. 2007 is when it got distribution in the US, because it was on my 2007 albums of the year list incorrectly. But anyway, they're from Australia, of course. Carnival, Sound Awake, a much heralded and praised and constantly referenced and recommended album from Carnival. And as much as I initially really loved a lot of it, and I still do like at least probably maybe close to half of it. Simple Boys, a well-written song, Goliath, New Day was a favorite, and especially Set Fire to the Hive. So basically the first 4 songs, it's Loudness Wars, Up the Wazoo, The Symbols Clip, and some of the songs go on a little too long. This album's it's only like 70 minutes long, and it's not, it may be a concept, Sound Awake, but anyway, Change, I think they had Change Part 2 on Themata. I can't remember. It's connected to the other song on Themata, but so yeah, it came out on originally in Australia, and for the pre-orders, I got it in June 5th, 2009. People love this album, but I had my issues with it. But again, it has some very good songs. I don't dislike it as much as like the Mars Volta's which speaking of, I forgot about that. Mars Volta's octahedron. Not octahedron, Mars Volta's Bedlam Goliath. But anyway, let's go on here. I'll have to find a place for that. So then on the 9th, 4 days later of June, saw Dredge's Pariah the Parrot Delusion. So it's like 2009 was the year of the anticipated album in some ways from a lot of these bands. Between Dredge, Carnival, I guess you could say, Pure Reason Revolution. This is a fantastic album. It's not my favorite Dredge album, but it's sort of, I go back and forth. It's part of that sort of amazing trilogy of records they released in the 2000s, in the 2000s, you could say. It has so many good songs between my favorite being Gathering Pebbles, Quotes, Epic, Information, super catchy, very U2 like. Ireland, Pariah, the song, Savior, I Don't Know, Morning This Morning is kind of melancholy, Cartoon Showroom, and the little vignettes, Down to the Cellar. It's a fantastic record. I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, I should do a whole video more in depth about it. It has a lot of these little vignettes. It was kind of different because it was a little bit like LCL. It was like a mixture of LCL and Catch Without Arms, you could say. In some ways polished. It took forever to come out because we thought this was going to come out as soon as like even 2006 or 2007. But it felt like when it came out, like it didn't disappoint. Like it was worth the wait, as good as it was. It didn't really break them through, although I think this was released on their own label or maybe Super Bowl. But anyway, the Pariah the Parrot to Delusion. It's called Pariah. Don't call it TP. Most people just refer to it as Pariah. The real big fans, we refer, like I remember, we refer to it as Pariah. That came out on June 9th. Almost like 4 years to the day that Catch With Our Arms had come out. So it's a couple more June releases, and I'm gonna stop in. I think, yeah. Oh, that's right. June 23rd was International Prog Day, so I can remember that. So June 21st saw Grimace. I believe this is their debut album, Panicon. Romanian band that sounds a lot like ours or U2 at points, a little bit like Vast. The singer doesn't really have that much of an accent, but this isn't their best record, my favorite record, but it's still good. Political Animals is one of the go-tos on here, but yeah, they were kind enough to send me their whole catalog on CD a few years ago because like nobody knew them outside of their area. It's like I heard about them through someone on, I think it was either Absolute Punk or might have been Rate Your Music, but anyway, good debut album from Grimace. Not my first, not my go-to always, but I've listened to it still a decent amount. Should do a video on them specifically. So then, as my friend, I saw King's X this day. It was June 23rd. We had a Dream Theater album come out that day, Darkest Hour, I believe, also. And then you had two. It was the Kiss album was supposed to come out that day, and it didn't. But you had the Deer Hunters, Act 3, Life and Death. Of course, you had Fangs that had come out earlier. You think Casey would have talked about that more? I don't remember that in 2009, but Michael Jackson had passed away a few weeks before this. I remember there was a little video that the whole band, the Deer Hunter, talked about their memories and appreciation for Michael Jackson. But anyway, Act 3, Life and Death. Probably my least favorite of all the acts still, but it's still a fantastic record when they did it live. That whole thing live on the stream was like a year ago. And I have the live version. Father, Life and Death. I would love them to do a version with a string section with that melody. Songs like Mustard Gas is probably the most well-known song on here. Saved is very kind of poppy, very psychedelic, very dream poppy. The Tank, What It Means to Be Alone, another poppy track. They did the animated video for that one, Writing on a Wall. It's the Deer Hunter. They haven't really done wrong to me. And then the Act 3, Life and Death, goes along with that same thing. It's not as much of a favorite as some of the others, but I still love it. So yeah, that came on International Prog Day, June 23rd, 2009. Octahedron from the Mars Volta also came out that day, so I'll just mention that. It's on my list. Yeah, it was their sort of more stripped down record, and then our 89.3, The Current, was playing songs from it, so hypocritically they wouldn't play songs from, Francis the Mute or even Ambitecture or Bedlam. I don't even think they did. But Octahedron I liked in some ways better than Then Bedlam and Goliath, because of at least the production problems, weren't there wasn't a loudness war necessarily. The cymbals didn't clip. I think Pridgeon was on this album, but then he would leave after this, Thomas Pridgeon. But yeah, I mean it has that one song In Absentia. I think of Porcupine Tree, but it's kind of more and more like an afterthought Mars Volta album. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I like the one that followed it better, but it's worth noting because I probably like it more than their new one. They have an album coming out now in April, but their comeback albums. So all right, so that's part one. I'll go on to part two in a minute, but